Jordan. And hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jordan. Great introduction for us, and so far an amazing show that you guys have been putting together. So welcome to everyone who's joining us from all across the world, and hopefully many people from the continent, across the African continent, joining us today. This is the Business of Gaming Forum. Today we have a very exciting number of guests joining us for a panel discussion around creating a compelling case study for potential investors, something that is ultimately important for the success of esports on the continent. So I thought, just by way of introduction, it'd be useful to set context for each of us to just explain a little bit about who we are and what our companies do, or what our role is in the industry, and then we can deep dive into the discussion points. So let me just start. My name is Kevin Meltzer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Big 5 Games. We're a mobile games and esports company based in Johannesburg, operating across the continent. The games we do are fantasy league, score prediction, and trivia quiz games. And we also do a lot of work on the esports and video game side. We have a number of community building initiatives that we run. And we also work with a number of brands, acting as an agency on their behalf, introducing them into the esports and gaming space and trying to help them navigate the opportunities. And that's what we do. I'm joined today by Jean Mouton, the brand manager at ASUS ROG, Republic of Gamers, Chilwe Shabukali, the managing director of Team Gematrix, one of the leading esports teams out of Zambia, and of course, Barry Luzada, who is the CEO of Medal State, one of South Africa, in fact, one of Africa's leading tournament organizers. So maybe just starting with you, Barry, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role in Medal State?
Thanks a lot, Kevin. So basically, I have been involved in gaming and esports in South Africa and Africa for the last 25 years. I started as a gamer. I started competing, and part of that journey took me to managing teams, being a caster, being a host, playing in international competitions, and kind of getting an idea as to how gaming and esports works around the globe. One of the things I wanted to do is kind of bring that experience back to South Africa and Africa, where I started Medal State. We are basically a premium esports and gaming organization. We focus on production quality, running tournaments, and creating opportunities for brands to be able to engage with gamers and esports competitors around Africa. We are one of the largest tournament organizers in Africa, where we've given away in excess of almost 2.5 million rand through Medal States and our partners. So, we also run these weekly leagues and competitions where we want to actually focus on the not so competitive esports player, and rather the gamer themselves. That's a brief introduction of Medal States and what I do with my team.
Thanks, Barry. Chilwe, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you're doing there in Team Gematrix.
Yeah, my name is Chilwe. I am managing director of Team Gematrix. So Team Gematrix is Zambia's premier esports organization, and we have players who are competing in fighting games, but we also do host tournaments both online and offline. We have a vision to actually grow esports in Zambia to actually be a sustainable and profitable business. That's mainly our vision. And we have also facilitated a couple of events in the country for companies such as Infinix Mobile, MTN, and Betway. So to mention a few.
Great. Thanks, Chilwe. And Jean, please go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. My name is Jean Mouton, the brand manager for ASUS and Republic of Gamers in Sub-Saharan Africa. Republic of Gamers is the #1 gaming brand worldwide. So we work on the hardware side, so everything from your motherboards, graphics cards, monitors, all the way through to laptops, desktops, and everything in between.
Great, thanks, Jean. So there's been a lot of discussion around esports, not just in the Business of Gaming Forum, but across the continent. And I think there's been some interesting things that have come out of the COVID scene and the lockdowns that we've all experienced. So what I've been saying all along is that video games, gaming, esports was on a great trajectory across the world and also in Africa over the last couple of years. And we were really growing, and the market is growing. But I think there's been a massive accelerator over the time of COVID. And I think esports went from something that a lot of people were saying, well, that's not a real sport, to it being the only sport that was available for anyone to view or play across the world. And that, I think, legitimized it quite a lot. And the other thing that I think was quite interesting across Africa, Africa has a large focus on sports betting in a lot of countries. There was no sports on, but esports was on. So a lot of people across the continent for the first time were introduced to this concept of esports and getting to see video games in a competitive manner as something that does match up to sports. So I think we're in a very good and exciting space. But today we're here to talk about compelling case study for potential investors, because what has been a recurrent theme across the Business of Gaming Forum over the last 2 days is that it's all about a return on investment, ROI. And that's the absolute key criteria that any brand, any sponsor, any investor will have in getting involved in the space. And that's what we really want to just unpack today, is to understand, what makes a good case study? What is the definition of success? And I thought it would be useful just to start, John, with you, because obviously as Republic of Gamers and ASUS, you're one of the largest investors into the esports competitive space globally, and also, of course, in South Africa. So it'd be great to start with your view around what do you think is happening in the space? What's been working for you guys? Have you seen any major differences since COVID hit and the way that you are now investing in the space?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Well, I think, like you said before, one of the most positive aspects of what we've seen is that COVID has just accelerated the trends that were already existing. So for us, it's really looks like this is a sustainable way for us to move forward. I think the context of COVID-19 really just sort of put everything into a higher gear, and that for us is a really positive sign. So, we're looking to build onto that, and going forward into next year, we're obviously looking at increasing our investment into esports over what we've done the past couple of years, just to sort of match up with that acceleration that we've seen. Because we really feel that the fundamentals are there. They always have been there. It's just the case that the audience has now just sort of caught up for us, which is now creating a more compelling case for us to invest in and obviously deliver that return on investment.
Okay, that's great to hear. And maybe, Chowe, from your side, what have you seen happening in Zambia? What sort of brands have been working with you and supporting you? And also just tell us a little bit about what the scene is like in Zambia. The great thing about the Business Gaming Forum taking place at Comic-Con Africa it is Africa, and we have a lot of representation across the continent. We're all learning here around what's going on in other countries. So that would be fascinating for us as well.
So the gaming scene in Zambia has really always been there, but it really hasn't had investment for quite some time. So we have a situation where majority of the gamers who can't afford consoles per se will really queue up in the high dense areas in the markets and play more video games from there. And the numbers really grow because they have a really good number of gamers that play like every day and every weekend, more especially after school. Other than that, recently, after we started our organization in 2018, we really found a situation where there was little to no activity in esports. But after we came up in the scene, we started seeing more people wanting to also start their own organizations, whether it was as a team or as a tournament organizer. And since then, we've seen a flow of people really being more professional and trying to do this more than just a hobby, but actually make it into a business. So that's been really great so far. And we've seen companies like MTN Zambia, Liquid Telecom Zambia, Betway, Infinix Mobile really dip their hands into esports and try to understand our community better and how best they can position themselves to actually partner with the right people in the industry and really get their return on investment. So I'm happy that a lot of people are really getting into that in that aspect. And the number of gamers has really increased because more people are now playing online as well. Before we had fiber connectivity in Zambia, we didn't really have access to online gaming. So it was mostly at LAN events that would have in universities or high schools. But now with the fiber connectivity and better 4G internet, we're seeing more people really dive into mobile gaming, which is PUBG and Call of Duty Mobile. So we really have big communities in that. One of the one group called Zambia Esports Center actually has over 600 gamers that play PUBG Mobile on Discord every week. And that's really something great that we've seen so far. And also online, we've got Apex and more things. People are playing on platforms like Metro States and SCGL every week. So at least the growth is really there.
Okay, I'm sure Barry is very happy to hear that. And Barry, maybe from your side in the middle state world, what are you seeing as far as brands getting involved? And I think you're in quite a unique space, right? Because you're in the middle. You're between the brands and the fans and the teams, and you have to keep everyone happy and make sure that the brands get a return, but also the fans are excited to get a return, and the teams are acting professional and also starting to grow and get that return. How do you manage and balance all of that?
Well, thanks, Kev. So firstly, I think for myself as a tournament organizer, I'm starting to see that a lot of brands are starting to see that gaming is actually an option and a place for them to work in. You know, they're not at this point currently, because of the pandemic, they're not completely focused on live events and on the traditional events that they're normally used to. So they've kind of been, not forced, but more taken another view on gaming and seen it as another platform, a potential space that they can work in and kind of use it to their advantage. And they're starting to see that there's ways and spaces that they can actually work within the space of gaming that is giving them a completely different outlook on the whole, you know, engaging with audiences and that. And, you know, being in between the brands and the gamers, it's sometimes a tense situation, because the gamers want a specific thing and the brands want a specific thing, and being able to kind of connect the two is always going to be a difficult thing, because gamers are playing for it and in gaming from a place of passion, from a place of pride and just enjoying and loving the game, whereas a brand obviously needs specific objectives. They need specific numbers and targets, because at the end of the day, it's what makes the world go round. Is, you know, someone like Jean has to, you know, he has to sell a certain amount of units or have a certain amount of people see what he's got to sell. And it's the exact same thing for any other brand out there. And I had this conversation in a panel yesterday, is that the gamers are just in it to play and win and, you know, be the best that they can be in that specific title. And as a TO, my objective is to make sure that those players and gamers engage with the brands at the same time. You know, find unique and exciting ways for brands to engage with the gamer, and for a way that it comes across as authentic and organic for the brand, so that it doesn't look like they're just trying to throw money at a problem, because that's not what they're trying to do. They really are wanting to engage with these audiences that you can't communicate or engage with through radio, TV, newspaper, billboards, those kinds of things. So as soon as we find a way that we can get brands to kind of get involved and get on board, and I say this because I worked with Jean last weekend, and I mean he was there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, you know, as someone representing his brand, making sure that this is what happens, this is how it is, you know, and wanting to understand the industry as well, because he wants to know how he can. And we've already since then subsequently had another meeting for future events, and this is what we enjoyed, this is what we didn't like, and this is what we need to change, and this is what we need to add, and this is how we prevent that from happening. So it's when brands actually get involved and get hands-on and start to understand, because it's actually not that difficult to understand gaming and the whole scene as a whole. It just seems daunting, because so many times before I've heard, yeah, my kid plays games. I mean, games, that must be a thing to do. But you don't have to understand the game to understand the scene of gaming.
I think that's very true. And Jean, I think, you know, something you'd mentioned before, and Barry was alluding to it, is when an investment is made into the gaming or esports space, it is judged against other investments you can do. So whether it be a TV ad, a radio ad, a billboard, you know, how do you measure the kind of return on an investment into an esports opportunity as opposed to a billboard? And is it judged the same, or was it treated quite differently?
Well, I think I don't want to get too technical, but you know, yes, to answer the first question, you do judge this against other forms of investment. So generally, what a marketing head or a brand head will do is they will look at the investment required, and then they'll run some simulations on that. Generally, we look at three main factors that we sort of use to assess an investment. It's your reach, it's your brand equity, and then it's your behavior change. Throughout this whole process, you will run a simulation and see, okay, well, look, if I'm looking at reach, what are my alternatives to that? If I'm spending $100 or $100,000, you still have to compare that to something. And just to break down that process in terms of maybe to understand what a brand is looking for, so you can understand how to sort of craft your pitch and refine your product so that it's more investable, is when we're looking at reach, which is the first element. It's how many people am I connecting to? Who's the audience, and what context are they going to be in when I'm communicating with them? Now, the number of reach or the number of people you want to reach really depends on, the actual audience itself, the product, the cost per acquisition for that customer, and what the lifetime value of that customer is. So it's quite flexible, but each brand will know that matrix and how to evaluate that. The second element around brand equity, this is more of a soft measure, and I think it's really where niche audiences can really excel in their value to brands. But here, the one question I'm asking is, how relevant am I to this audience? And through investing in your product, whether it's a tournament or a team or an individual player, if I'm associating my brand with you and with your brand, am I becoming more relevant to your audience? Are they able to increase the brand recall lift later on down the line when I want to communicate with them again? Are they going to be able to be more receptive to my messaging? And the final one is really where the moneymaker is, and that's behavior change. So a lot of people think that when you're looking at tournaments or digital platforms or even online or offline events, it's really difficult to measure. But there are a set of macros which go into allowing you to measure your return on investment. And these macros are sort of markers for future success. So things like, number of subscribers, follows, mentions, PR coverage, all those sort of macro measurements are indicators of future success. So those numbers will have to be mentioned. You will have to sort of have an idea as to how many of those you're going to generate, because taking those numbers, those macros, and your reach, and the level of brand equity, which is really your variable as how good a product you are, you can put those all together and get an idea as to how successful your return on investment is going to be. And the longer you're in business, the more reference points you have to see whether it's worth it or not. And I can tell you, as many brand managers or marketing heads or directors or managers that you approach, ultimately the person who signs this off, they're not really going to be too interested in esports. It's going to be someone signing the check, and they're going to want to know how this is going to impact the balance sheet. So having those three elements nailed down, you might not have to excel in all of them. You can be a company or a brand or a team that's growing, but really having an understanding of those elements and presenting them, even if you think they're terrible, if you can show that, hey, look, I understand what you're looking for, even though my numbers aren't great now, the fact that you understand and you're willing to work with the brand shows that there's an opportunity for growth. And I think that's the most important element is come prepared, understand your numbers, even if they're not great. And if you can, understand where the opportunities to grow are, because I guarantee you that brand manager is going to mention a few things. And if you've already got a couple of ideas up your sleeve, it's going to make that whole process of securing that investment a lot easier, because there's going to be, a little bit of synergy there between you two, and that's going to make them feel more comfortable in investing in you.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe, Cholwe, to come to you, one of the challenges I think we have here in Africa is that when we talk about esports and when brands look at esports, they're looking at the international figures. People talk about the international and the money that the teams make there. People talk about Booger winning $3 million in the Fortnite World Champs. People talk around the return that these big brands are seeing, the Coca-Colas, Nissans, all investing in the space. Have you found that a challenge when you go and talk to brands, that they somehow have a view of what esports or gaming looks like internationally? They're relating it into the local perspective, and you just can't do that. There's really no comparison at this stage. Is that something you've come across as we've come across here in South Africa?
Yes, that's something we've come across. There was a time in 2019, I think I approached one of the companies for potential sponsorship when we're going for a tournament. And when we're having like the get to know each other conversation, they kept talking about the same thing. It was more like, okay, so esports is valued at X billion dollars approximately. And how much is it really valued as in Zambia? So it was a very tricky question because, as the first esports organization in the country, you really don't have the numbers. So you're just like, okay, how do we portray more value to you, and how will it be more like a return on investment? And I think it's more like what one said. You really have to have those 3 key points nailed down so that they understand, they feel like they are connecting with you, in the sense that you understand that they're a business and they're not a charity organization. They're a business that really wants to see how best they're going to get their value in return from you as an esports entity. So we really had to brush up our shoes on that, and it has really helped. Um, the other thing I can say is, when it comes to that positioning, the best thing to also do is really focus on growing the brand. Really focus on growing your platform engagement and numbers. Other than that, you have to focus on content creation, because content is really king. Content is there because at least when the brands engage with you, they'll see that there's actually an opportunity, because esports is known for really growing exponentially. That's what everyone is really interested in, the growth rate, how valuable it is, because you have an audience that's going to grow with your brand from the age of 7. Because I started gaming at 7 and I'm 25 now, and I've been playing from console to console. So it's really about also trying to position ourselves as brands in front of that audience for the long term. So if we can, get a proposition that's really about long-term benefits, I think that's more attractive than short-term, say one event, or just a marketing strategy. But thinking in the long term, how best can we as brands and esports really benefit from each other in the long term? So that has helped us, because at least from when we pivoted to thinking like that and behaving that way, we've actually seen more companies work with us, and we've been partnered with a company called TechX Hub in the Middle East. So they sponsor us with equipment. So it's really more about value proposition and how you position yourself as an esports entity. So that's what I think.
Right. And I actually saw that. I saw a release, and I also saw on your site that you're backed by TechX Hub. And I thought what was interesting about that was a brand or an organization I'd never heard of before. And because they were in the esports space, because they're sponsoring you, I looked them up and I started engaging with them. And obviously, because they're a digital business, they have an opportunity to capture me as a client. And that's a brand new customer coming out of the esports space. And I would never potentially have come across them if it wasn't for the esports focus that they have and the support for you guys there. When you were talking about content creation, I think that's something that Barry can talk to as well, because where Barry's been pushing the scene for some time is really about professionalizing it, making sure that everyone ups their game. He spoke about internationally seeing what's there and trying to bring it back. But Barry, that 360 kind of view of, the content creation, the professional tournament, the players getting involved, the fans all giving us their digital currency and liking and, supporting the views. How important is that to actually be a successful element for any brand getting in the space?
Well, thanks. I think Troy mentioned it earlier, is that brands don't want to be seen as a charity. They that marketing budget is not like, they're not standing out on the road like handing that stuff out like free sweets to everybody. That there kind of needs to be a trade exchange happening here, and part of that is content creation, for people to engage with their product. It's no point in someone coming along and saying, here's my drink, and nobody actually does anything with their drink or knows about their drink. Sure, I think there's a certain element where at the end of the day, a brand wants to see people going out there and actually buying their product. But I learned words yesterday that I didn't know were around, the Zoomers and the Boomers and stuff like that. And I'm apparently a Boomer. I don't know if it's the beard that's giving it away, but when you look at the way that the kids of today are actually engaging with things, and they work from a very authentic place. They have this huge loyalty to brand, and I know that personally, because as someone that's grown up over the years, and I'm not saying this because Jean, I've worked with Jean in the past, but ASUS has been a brand that I've supported from the moment I bought my first PC. I haven't gone out and bought another, but that's my personal choice. The same way, I have an Apple phone is because when it's time to buy a new phone, I don't go out like we used to in the old days, and like the old days, goodness, listen to me. I'm like,
you are a boomer.
I didn't, we don't go in the days when I was younger and, go and see which one I was going to get my best value for money for, and this, that, and the next thing. It's just an automatic thing, like knee-jerk response. I'm going to go and get the new Apple phone, and that's what I'm waiting for, and that's what I'm watching for, and that's just how it works. So, brands also need to look at it as that when you're investing and getting involved in gaming and wanting that digital like, or that digital, that currency that we're talking about, it's about creating a relationship with your future customer, because Nokia thought that they owned the space for a very long time, and all of a sudden that changed overnight. When you're dominating, when you think you're dominating in a space, things change overnight. Facebook was the social media platform to be on, not anymore. That is a thing of the past. Twitter is starting to become aged. We're looking at spaces like Instagram and TikTok, and those places where young people are wanting just a flick of a thumb, and you're going past that content because it's 30 seconds of content that they are consuming at a rate of knots. When you're engaging with this audience, it is about that digital currency. It is about that content so that these people can consume this stuff. But at the same time, it's about, and this goes back to my previous points, is when brands are keeping their finger on the pulse of this super evolving space, that they know exactly where they're going with. If you look at the way McDonald's engaged with esports in Europe, where they took the gaming lingo from Counter-Strike and integrated it into their fast food menu, where their side orders were called utilities, their burger, just their cheeseburger was called the eco buy, and then their full buy was the Big Mac, the chips, and the soda. In the same way that, if you look at the way all these brands are starting to engage, is by sitting down, trying to understand the audience, coming in authentically, and then you start to find a way that these kids just want to engage with you all the time. They want to, when I decide I want to have takeaways or go out for dinner, my daughter decides where we're going out for dinner, because that's what she feels like. If she feels like pizza, that's where I, as a dad, am going to take her, because I don't want to have to put up with going to whatever restaurant I've decided to go to, and she's sitting across the table and she's unhappy. When we go for, and it's the kids that have that have the buying power. It's, Mom, I want these V-Bucks, and Mom just, cool, here's a credit card, or where must I put in my credit card details? It's about understanding what these kids, what actual power these kids have, because they've all got phones, definitely have phones before I had a phone. They've all got internet access. They're all free agents, and they're all wanting to spend their mom and dad's money.
Okay, so if you are looking for a new phone, Jean, you should be promoting your mobile gaming phone that you have coming out. I know it's Android, but you want some behavior change, it can start with Barry right there, and obviously you've got a very powerful device that I think is actually very important for 100%. The content, because my belief is mobile gaming is what's going to drive the esports and gaming world across the continent. It really is. But I want to come back to something that Barry mentioned around a brand like McDonald's, because what I'd like us to explore now is a bit about the endemics versus the non-endemic brands. For any of our viewers that aren't aware what that is, endemic is a brand that's in the space by being nature of a technology brand or a telco, or some brand that is very much connected already to gaming and technology. The non-endemics are the McDonald's of the world, Coca-Cola, Red Bulls, brands that aren't technology brands per se. And I think that's where the big opportunity in the space really is how to bring those non-endemic brands into the space. So Jean, your point of view, do you think it's any different for the endemics versus the non-endemics, or is it pretty much the same and the same kind of return that they're looking for?
No, definitely. The fundamentals are exactly the same. I think obviously the way that that you approach that is slightly different, and I think you have to be a little bit more creative in terms of how you're going to promote their product. Because I think Barry mentioned a word earlier, which was authentic. People can smell BS a mile away nowadays, especially the younger you get, the the harder that radar is working. So, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be legit. If you're going to come in as a non-endemic, you need to be very careful around how you position your brand so that you don't seem like you're just throwing a sales message up against the window. But I think that really will come naturally as the sport develops in creating identities that are varied. If you look at some of the other sports around the world, the actual product that the NFL or Major League Baseball or NBA or even Super Rugby sells, that product that gets streamed out on TV is a pretty standardized product. But then if you strip that back and you look at the individual teams and the individual players, you've got a plethora of different identities, of different stories to tell. And I think the way for non-endemics to really capture on this, and I think the way that brands like myself can also get far more value and invest a ton more money, is if these individual brands from both the teams and the players, if those stories are told in an authentic manner, and we can start to get some reach around who these players are and how they came to be, at the top of their game, and what do they like, what don't they like, what do they stand for. That's a step that I think is currently missing, which I think is going to sort of slow the entrance of non-endemics, because it's very difficult to relate in a human manner to a tournament, but it's very easy to do that to an individual player. And I think once we start seeing individual players taking a little bit of responsibility in terms of saying, look, I'm going to manage myself and my brand, and I'm going to invest, whether it's time or money or both, into building up my personal brand so that everyone can see what I stand for, there's going to be far more opportunities for brands to say, hey, that guy is us. He stands for what we stand for, and I'm going to get behind him. Until that happens, there's going to be a very small pool of opportunity for non-endemics to target.
Right. And Charlie, so how have your conversations gone with endemics and the non-endemics? You did mention Betway. Obviously, Betway has a vested interest in the esports space because it's part of the betting kind of world. But how's the conversation been talking to the technology brands as opposed to the non-tech brands?
The conversation mostly, for example, we've had with companies like Liquid Telecom has been mostly about how best can they return on investment in terms of sales. So with Betway, it was more about how best can they get attached to this new audience, because they do fantasy leagues and all that. So what it came down to is also us understanding that different investors in the space vary. So there are some brands that are looking for how best can you guys help me get in front of the audience so that I can have a return on investment in terms of sales. Others would just want the brand affiliation to say, okay, we worked with you guys on this event, or you manage this for us or facilitated it for us. Other people will only want say sponsorship in terms of being part of your story long term. They would want to be part of the achievements. All your players went from X to Y and Z. So I think it depends on what the particular sponsor wants. So you have to really position your value proposition according to what they want. I feel like when it comes to sponsors, it's very important to listen more and talk less and understand really where they're from, because if it's something what I've noticed is when we've engaged companies in Zambia locally is they don't really understand esports and it's really new. So what we've spent more time with doing even right now is investing in a relationship first, them understanding what we do, how we do it, and us understanding them more, understanding what they need and what they're really looking for, like what are they really looking for from the community or from us. And then after that, it moves on to the next stage of, okay, how do we execute this value? How do we get to this goal? We make our goals and our action plans, and then it's a progressive action plan per se. So that's what I think needs to be done. And I think the other thing is for companies, whether non-endemic or endemic, investing in esports, I feel it should be like one said, it should be natural and it shouldn't feel forced. I always tell brands whenever we engage with them that they shouldn't expect to make $1 million or $1 million just because they've worked with us and we've shown them an audience like in 2 months or 3 months or something. It's a long-term relationship. Um, like Barry also said, gamers are loyal and they are loyal to what they like. So it's about that long-term relationship where you position yourself as a brand in front of them and say, okay, we have this value for you, and make them want to be your customer in that sense. So it has to be very natural. It shouldn't feel forced. I like how back in the day, Dr. Pepper did an advert with Team Solomit, and it was just a fun, short, really short advert that went viral of them pretending to be Power Rangers and drinking Dr. Pepper before they transformed into Power Rangers. That was so cool, and it related to a very number of gamers, us, the guys who are boomers who used to watch Power Rangers, and the guys who just drink Dr. Pepper now who are like 10 years old or 12 years old. So it's important to be natural. If you're endemic or non-endemic, be natural with the community. They can smell BS from afar, like one said. Also, build a long-term relationship. Don't make a deal for 6 months, 3 months. That's not really going to give you the return on investment you're looking for. It has to be long-term, so that you build a relationship with the audience and the brand. Yeah, so that's what I think should be done.
That's great. I think what I'm picking up as a common theme, and I've spent a lot of time talking to people across the continent, is there's a great maturity that's coming into the gaming and esports space. There's a better understanding of who we are, where we are, and how to engage with brands. And I think to your point, Joey, it's about a long-term relationship. If brands are arriving, want to do a quick hit, do a limited investment and then get out, that's maybe not the right approach. We are building a massive opportunity in the continent here. And I think, Barry, to you, maybe you want to speak, but I also wanted to ask you to talk around the level of investment, because maybe brands think that the investment has to be so massive it might put them off, but there's often a low investment with a high return in the opportunities we're all engaged in.
Cool. So yeah, just to add quickly, and it kind of ties into the whole non-endemic, endemic thing, is at the end of the day, if you think about it, gamers are consumers of everything. They need toothpaste, they need deodorant, they need coffee, they need all of that stuff. And in fact, they actually consume a lot more of it. And let me also make a clarity here. Gamers are not nerdy people. Gamers are not fat people that sit in a dark basement surrounded by pizza boxes. They are normal people. My daughter's 14 and she would classify herself as a gamer, and she does all kinds of activities outside of the house as well. So, there's also this kind of stereotype around gamers where, we only like sit and eat pizza, drink fizzy drinks and play games. That is not a thing. And like I say, non-endemic, endemic is, sure, I understand on the fundamental terms, but gamers still need a phone. They still need airtime. They still watch Netflix. They still, they do all of this stuff outside. I need glasses. I need, all kinds of things, clothes, everything. So when it comes to like brands getting involved in investing, and it again ties to what Chuole said. I'm going to get that name wrong every single time I try it, so please forgive me. It doesn't matter, how you look at investing in gaming. You can't do it for these short little stints. Sure, you can throw money at something, but it's just never going to work. It's this, if you look at rugby, if you look at football, if you look at cricket, that's years and years of building up and investing into a sport and making it bigger. We're now in a space where it's digital, not just digital advertising, but digital sports as well. We need to open our minds up to the fact that this is also a sport, and that there is investment opportunities, whether it be in a tournament, where if you compare apples for apples, a Super Rugby event to a esports event, you're now buying an event or owning an event like Vodacom owns the Super Rugby, or Castle owns the cricket, if they still do the test match series. But the point is that you're investing in either a tournament or a team like G Matrix has with TechX Hub, or you're investing in a player. And Jean touched on it earlier. Players are brands as well, just as Francois Pinard was for rugby, or will any sort of sporting personality is a brand on their own, as a team is a brand on their own, is a tournament is a brand on their own. There are all spaces which you can invest in, and that's where you come with your small investments. You can start with a competition, and you don't have to put in millions of rands. You need to sit down with a tournament organizer or someone that understands gaming and kind of, this is our objective, like McDonald's did with I think it was Blast Pro, and like MasterCard did with League of Legends, and like DHL did with Dota International. You sit down and you go, cool, I don't understand gaming. This is my brand. This is what I want to do, or this is what I want to achieve. How do we make that happen? How do we get views? How do we get people to engage with our products? How do we get people to buy our product? Sit down with someone and say to them, this is what I want. Because at the end of the day, if you go to any person on the street, whether it's for gaming or for anything else, and you go, here's 100,000 rand, make people know me. Just it's not going to happen. You need to come with your clear objectives and your clear understanding of what you want to achieve. Explain that to whoever it is, someone like me, someone like ACGL, whatever it is, whoever that, and you say to them, this is what I want to achieve, and Metal State or ACGL or VS or will come back to you with a proposal. And the same way you have people pitch for your business is the same way those organizations will pitch you an idea and say, this is how we think you should do it. And that comes with time. You talk about PUBG, Tencent. We worked with Tencent Africa. We started our PUBG Mobile League with 30 teams. We now sit with over 160 teams entering into those leagues, and that's a year later. That is huge growth. These guys are playing 2-3 nights a week. They are invested in this league, in this tournament, and they're only playing for 10,000 rand a month. That's chump change in some regard.
Prize money. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think
we're running out of time. We're going to take some questions, but I really just wanted to maybe one last question to Jean is, what does success look like for Republic of Gamers, ASUS? So I know you did, from the external side, it looked like a great tournament you did last weekend, the ROG Invitational, Soldier of Fortune. But how do you measure success, and what does success look like to you?
Thanks, Kev. I think for us, if we're looking at success as a brand within this context, success for us will be growing the industry to the point where it becomes a viable professional choice for athletes to make. If we can get to that position where we've got people who can, without fear or favor, go into this as a profession, and the industry is set up to support that, like professional rugby or soccer or any other profession, I think that's the point at which we can say, look, we've had success within esports, because that's the only way we're truly going to grow and get this to the point where this can be something that you can support your family on, is if we make it an acceptable choice from an early age where you can say, look, I want to be a professional esports athlete, and all of the structures are in place to make that happen.
Right, and you as a brand, you're trying to make that happen, and if that does come about, then there's success for you, because obviously the rising tide lifts all boats at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's an impossible task to achieve on your own. It's something that all stakeholders need to take some responsibility in, all the way from the brands to the TOs, to the players, to our national sports federations, the media. It's really a holistic challenge, and I think that if we can get there and we can play our part, that's definitely a success for me.
Great. And Charlie, maybe to you, just before we take some questions, what does success look like you for the team, besides winning all your competitions, of course, and being a leading team? I'm talking particularly about brands being involved and how the success story works for them as well as you.
For us, being a success story means being a sustainable and profitable business in the long term, and creating opportunities for our players to actually make this a career and actually make it sustainable for them to support themselves and their families. And when it comes to brands that we work with, it's us both reaching our goals together and aligning our visions together and really being successful in that, whether it's promoting them to our audience, or helping them create strategies for esports. So that's what success looks like for us.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And Barry, lastly, just to you, I mean, what does success look like for you? What's been one of the most successful tournaments you've kind of run, and how do you kind of make sure that you can repeat that kind of success?
I think that's kind of like a chicken and egg scenario, right? If you compare the way tournaments are happening overseas, I mean, the League of Legends World Champs is happening currently right now, which is why I'm like semi distracted, because there's like 200, 300,000 people watching. And I think if you get to a point in South Africa where we can pull, I'm not even going to go to hundreds of thousands. If we can sit and have a consistent 10,000 people watching some content that's being created by Africans in Africa, and the world starts to look at us without there needing to be, this over, I mean, outside of the esports world, nobody even knows what the League of Legends World Champs is. Nobody knows that there's over 3 million people that watch it over the weekend. There's just, or 300 million people rather. Let's just not beat around the bush here. That's the kind of success we're talking about, is when I can go with a brand and take esports in Africa to the next level. For me and I know that comes with actually making it viable financially for the brand and for everyone involved.
I think that's important, that there is a comparison. So you mentioned 10,000 people. That is a success story. And the reason why that's a success story is if we look at our professional soccer league here, the PSL, they would struggle on any sort of normal match day without some of the bigger teams to draw 10,000 people to come into a stadium to actually watch that match. I think you'd find that story repeating all the way across the continent, where it's hard to bring thousands and thousands of people into stadiums just to watch football. So if we're trending towards that and we get to those kind of levels, it very much is a definition of success. And I think that is important. And back to John's original kind of point, is you need to compare that investment of what you would get. So am I investing in football on the continent, or am I investing in gaming and esports across the continent? And what would that return be? And I think our numbers can actually stack up. I think they are starting to trend upwards. And I think our greatest opportunity is actually the continent, not the individual countries. Because if we look at our numbers, we might be limited in individual countries. But when we look at across the continent, over 1 billion people in the continent, the youngest audience in the world, and growing rapidly. So, as we come together, I think as a continent, we can really see large numbers starting to happen. And I think that's where the biggest opportunity lies. So we answered that question. That was a question around how do you measure success. Let's just see if anything else comes up around questions from the audience. And while we do that, I think what's also important, so we do have a question, what sort of player and viewer numbers are considered a good ROI for an event? So Barry, maybe you respond to that. And Chol, we're coming from the Zambia side, because maybe it's different in South Africa.
I think Jean needs to actually respond to that, because he's the guy that's paying me. And at the end of the day, I still get the same amounts of money whether we got 10 viewers or, so he's the one that's going to actually go, this was worth my money or not.
Great point, Jean. Up to you.
So, well, that really just depends on how much you've invested. So it's a really difficult question to answer. Again, look, you need to go back to your fundamentals, and I'm sorry, there's no direct answer for this. But you just really need to have a look at what your objectives were when you set them in the beginning, and whether you've reached those. So for the tournament myself and Barry ran last week, we had some pretty high objectives based on what we saw last year and based on where we wanted to move. And we managed to smash all of those out of the park. So you really need to look at what you want to achieve, and what you've actually achieved afterwards, and how much it's going to cost you. And I think the easiest thing to do would be to say, what are you normally investing in on a day-to-day basis, and what sort of result is that giving you? And just try it. I would suggest, if you're non-endemic, go out, consult someone like Barry, put your toe in the water, do a comparative investment, or a comparative analysis, and see if that works for you.
Can I just add in there, Kev? Yeah. I know you want to wrap up, but it's exactly that. And Jean made he didn't. I mean, he wasn't trying to make a point, but we did this last year, and this comes to investing into the esports scene. That means he's done it for 12 months now. Well, more than 12 months, obviously, but RAG Invitational has been an 18-month process. We conceptualized the idea. We ran the first one 12 months ago. 12 months later, we came back to the table. This is what we want to achieve. This is how we want to do it. And these are the numbers we want to beat. You can't go into esports for your first time and go, okay, show me 1 million people. And that's the biggest thing that South Africans, I can only speak for South Africans, tend to make a mistake, is we sell esports on those international numbers. And it's just doing everybody an injustice.
Okay. Yes, that is a zebra that's just entered the room with me, in case you're wondering.
Welcome to Africa.
And I think on that bombshell, we should wrap up. And let me just take the opportunity to thank everyone that's joined us today. So we had Chalwe Shabakali from Team Gematrix in Zambia, and wishing you all the luck. We'll be following your story and seeing what comes out of Zambia. And we're very excited around what's happening. Barry Lizada, the CEO of Metal State, running competitions every single week. People go to the Metal State site, go enter. And thanks, of course, to John Mitton and all the investment you guys are making into the space. You know, we have nothing. We can build a community, we can put players together. But if we don't have brands getting involved, if we don't have investment, the scene won't really move. So thank you for all your comments. Thank you for all your input. This has been the Business of Gaming Forum. We were talking about creating a compelling case study for potential investors. And thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks.